Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing. We're here in the garden on a drizzly morning at the 1st of June. Going to look at one of my favorite perennials and a technique today. So we're going to try to get it in before it really starts to rain. June is an explosive season in the perennial garden. So much stuff comes along so quickly. And you really get this big explosion of color in June with geraniums, iris, Amsonias. It goes on and on and on. And one of my favorite plants of this time of the year, albeit a short-lived season for it, is the Oriental poppy. There really isn't anything quite as spectacular, maybe, and vibrant as the Oriental poppies when they come into bloom. Typical one here. This is sort of the typical Oriental poppy that you get. Really vivid orange with the black centers and that interesting seed pod that forms in the center. Beautiful plants. Admittedly, they can be a bit of a spreader in the garden, especially if they're really happy. The clumps do increase fairly readily, so you do need to be aware of that. But I just love the fact that you get this amazing splash of color, vibrant shades, right from whites through pinks, into oranges, and even into reds. And there's still Patty's Plum out there, which is a really interesting sort of a plum purple color. I think the thing that I really like about the Oriental poppies is, you may not even like orange per se, but they come in, they blast, they bloom for a few weeks, and then they're done. But that little few weeks is just a spectacular time, much like when the cherry blossoms bloom or when lilacs come into bloom. They have their season, and then they disappear. Lots of sun is best. They will take some shade, although your flower display may not be as good. The one most important thing you need to remember about Oriental poppies is that after they bloom, they die down for the summer and disappear. So you need to be prepared to plant them near things that come along a little bit later. Ornamental grasses are excellent. Daylilies will work. Summer phlox will work. You can really get a lot of sort of your late summer bloomers, asters. Your late summer bloomers, combine them with their Oriental poppies, so they're still short when the poppies are blooming, and they can take full center stage. Like I said, full sun, dry soil's fine, good drainage is important. And don't forget that I don't have any in seed yet because they've just started blooming. But they have really interesting seed pods as well. You just want to be sure that you get those seed pods off before they scatter out their seeds. Because poppies make a lot of seed, so you want to avoid maybe overseeding with just poppies. But I just love them. They're one of my favorite plants, and a joy at this time of the year. Thing at this time of the year to be thinking about is what to do with your late summer perennials. How do they behave for you? See a couple of weeds here. I'll just pull them while I'm going. A little bit of dog strangling vine. Gotta love that. How do your late summer blooming perennials behave for you? It's an important time to think about that. And we'll look at a couple of examples. There's a technique. If you have late summer blooming perennials that get really, really tall, too tall for your liking, and get really floppy when they come into bloom, or the situation they're in, that you need them 4 feet and 6 feet. There's a great technique out there, and in England they call it the Chelsea chop, because it's done right about late May for England. For us, we're talking first week of June. So we'll call it the Chelsea chop, and I'll explain what that is. So if you've got a perennials like tall summer phlox, for example, this particular one gets about 6 feet tall when it blooms, and that can be a bit overwhelming for some people and for some gardens. So what you can do is what's called the Chelsea chop. Now, if you want to indiscriminately have at the whole clump, you can do it with hedge trimmers. I prefer to go around with scissors or snips. And if you reduce the height of these stems now, you will reduce their overall final height. You know, I hate to see, people go out and when a plant starts to flop, they run out and grab something and tie it up because it never looks right. If you want to keep them looking natural, then you come in and you do what's called the Chelsea chop. So what you can actually do is we could take this phlox that's going to be 6 feet tall, it's already 3 feet tall, and go in and reduce it by a third or a half. And I said you can do that with hedge trimmers. Just go in and give them a chop, but that can look a little messy. So what I prefer to do is go in and just go through the garden and just take these stems and just reduce them by a third to a half. It's a really simple process. Doesn't hurt the plants at all. But what happens is that if you left these alone, this stem's going to keep growing. This one here, we've stopped or halted that upright trend of growth. So what's going to happen is you're going to get side branching coming from these nodes here, these ones down here. These are going to branch, and then they're going to grow. So what happens is you've reduced the height, you've made the plant more stocky. It's going to have twice as many, maybe 4 times as many shoots, and that's going to give you 4 times as many flowers when it does bloom. Also what it does is it'll alter the bloom time slightly. So a neat trick, and you can try this, take part of a clump of summer phlox and don't touch it. So let's say this is your front half, your back half. Leave the back half to grow to its height. Take the whole front half back, like this. Sort of do the chop on just half of them. And what will happen is that the front half will continue to get tall. So the back half's going to keep growing. If it blooms in August, let's say, first 2 weeks of August, this part's going to bloom first, and then about a week or 2 later, as this part's fading, this part's going to bloom at a shorter height. So you can alternate and alter and control a bit of your late summer color by doing this sort of selective pruning. So it's kind of a fun way to extend the bloom and pack a lot more color into the gardens. You can do this with any of your upright growing late summer bloomers that grow like a phlox. Asters are exceptionally good to do this with. And I'm going to also look at one that a lot of people do have problems with, and excuse, it's got a few weeds coming out of the middle of it, but I'm going to show you as well. If you have tall sedums, we've got a few other perennials in here, a couple of goldenrods we don't want, but we've got some Tradescantia ohioensis here that's going to give us a show at this time of the year. So it sort of hides the sedum at this point. When the sedum's starting to come into bloom, the Tradescantia is finished, we'll cut those right down, allow the sedum to come. But if you've got these sedum spectabiles, or any of these late summer blooming sedum types, you can do exactly the same thing as we just did. You can go in and just remove sort of the top 3-4 inches of all the shoots And what that'll do, that will reduce the height. It'll reduce the problem of having really long stems with big heads of flowers on them that flop over and sort of volcano out from the middle. What you'll get is you'll get a more compact plant, stronger stems. You'll have lots of heads of slightly smaller flowers, but the show will be spectacular anyway. Even though the flower heads individual aren't as big, if you just go in and take those shoots and just trim them back. Like I say, you can be really quick about this if you want and just chop them. They'll look a little ratty for a week or so as the new growth is coming, but then they'll be fine. And if you want to make a hedge, you've got millions of cuttings of sedum spectabiles, because these will all root and make plants this year and will probably even bloom for you. So now's a good time to get out in that garden, enjoy your June bloomers, but prepare your summer bloomers and your fall bloomers for their upcoming time in the garden by doing the Chelsea chop or doing some selective pruning to get extended bloom and different stages of bloom time. We got any questions this morning?
So what about mums?
So mums, if you've got hardy chrysanthemums in the garden, you can do exactly the same thing. Older varieties like Clara Curtis, Mary Stoker, some of the other ones that you get are hardy. There's the Igloo series, and there's a couple of others. Now is the time to do that pruning. You can just do a pinch if you want. If you want to just do a pinch, I don't know if you can see that. If you want to just do a pinch and just take the tip out, that's an option too. It'll all sort of depend on where you want the height later on in the season. A little pinch will cause it to branch without losing much height. A bigger cutback will reduce the height, but increase the number of flowers and flowering stems you have.
Betty says she snips her mums 2 times during the season for sturdier stems and bushier plants.
For mums, yeah, it often would be a couple of times a year. Will certainly give you bushier plants and more flowers. You do need to pay attention. If you have a really, really late blooming variety of mum, like Hillside Pink Sheffield, for example, which sometimes won't bloom till late October. If you prune it back too much, you're not going to get bloom until November. So you'd be aware of that. But for most mums, especially if you've had sort of the more modern garden mums and they're overwintering for you, then the early pinch is great. And you can do that a couple of times.
And when would be the latest you should pinch them to get your fall show?
Well, you need to be aware. For mums, growers don't pinch after about, I think, the 1st of July. So certainly June is fine. If they're putting on lots and lots of growth and you do it now, you could give it a light pinch towards the end of the month and then leave them alone. Same thing with phlox and things. If you do it too late, you're going to interrupt your bloom time. So that's why it's in England they call it the Chelsea chop. You do it late May. For us, it's usually first week of June, shortly after the Chelsea Flower Show happens. So that's where that term came from. And it works really, really well to control the height and bloom of your late summers.
So Rosalind overwintered her geraniums, but they are not flowering on any of the tips. Any advice?
Well, it's only the 1st of June. If they weren't cut back quite quite heavily, you might want to think about giving them a good cutback. Plus, also get the feed on them, get the fertilizer on them now, give them a good kick, and just get them really jumping. And if they're strong plants, in a couple of weeks you'll be starting to set bud, and then they'll bloom for the rest of the season.
And Mary would like to know what type of perennial flower plants could she plant in a shady area of her backyard that stays fairly wet after it rains?
Wow. Boy, oh boy. I wish I had that situation. That's a great place for your big, bold foliage tropicals. Ligularias, Rogersias. If it's not too shady, astilbes. Try your fall anemones in there as well. Yeah, those it'd be a great place for those big, sturdy, big leafy, tropical-looking perennials.
And Karen would like to know if she can Chelsea chop her echinacea.
Echinacea is a little bit different. So there are a few plants that you wouldn't actually. I mean, you could do it a little bit, but you got to be careful. Echinaceas have all their crowns at soil level. I wish I had one in front of me to show you, but I don't. They don't sort of make these stems that come up and then bloom on top. What I would do with echinaceas is let them come up, let them bloom, deadhead the upper flowers as they finish, and the flower stalks will often branch and send off some secondary blooms, which will give you color later on. It's a little bit different growth habit. Look at the way an echinacea comes out of the ground. Kind of like a daylily. All the growth shoots are right at the soil level. So those perennials don't respond to sort of the Chelsea chop like something like a phlox does.
All right, that's it.
All right, we'll wrap it up for now. The rain is starting, so we're going to get back inside. Enjoy your garden. Get out and have some fun. And we'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.